Welcome back to Coffee and UFOs, two of my favorite things. I have a special guest tonight, Steve Bassett. We finally got it together, Steve, so I'm really happy to have you back on. How are you?
I'm pretty good. Just the last 3 weeks really took it out of me. We had the a major conference in Indian Wells, and I also spoke up in Oregon with George and Ori, and I'll tell you, I'm getting old.
It's
I slept in the
wearing on you a little.
Yeah.
Yeah. I was just talking to a friend who's also a researcher in these fields, and he said this is going to be the last time I think I fly globally. He's like, I can't do any more 24-hour trips.
God knows I haven't done that yet, but I'm hoping to do one in October. We'll see.
Oh, really? Where are you going?
There's a Dubai conference that's been in the works for a while, and
Wow.
it's tentatively rescheduled for October, but it's a big one, huge, but it's kind of subject to the vicissitudes of the modern world and the issues between countries, which, as you probably know, is problematic right now.
Yes, understood. We can speak about our own country. I'd really like to jump into the recent Wall Street Journal article titled "The Pentagon Disinformation That Fueled America's UFO Mythology." You know, I know what I think about it. I know what others think about it. I'd really like to know what your assessment is.
Oh, I'm sure we're on the same page. This requires context to understand what just happened. And we're in a short fuse tonight, so let me make it real quick. Sure. We've made enormous progress since 2017. Everybody knows that. There's so much has happened that now are taken for granted. But if we could bring people from the 50s and 60s forward and show them what's going on, they'd be like, oh, unbelievable. And so we've been moving closer and closer. Occasionally slowed way down, but closer and closer to the finish line. The finish line for me, that's only one finish line, and that's the president's got to confirm the ET presence. Or not human, advanced unhuman technology, but whatever the hell. And we are closer and closer and closer. So much has happened to make this possible. Fine. Now, the people on the inside are fully aware of how close we're getting. And they started to push back. And that's fine. I don't blame them. There's so many people involved. There's a lot of embarrassing questions. It's going to be very awkward. I get it, but probably not as bad as they think. So they started pushing back. The first major push was when they sent a bunch of lobbyists up the hill and said, look, you got to gut that UAP Disclosure Act that Schumer wrote with Rounds, and they've actually submitted it for, cleared the Senate, right? And so that's how close it got, right? So they had to cut it off at the reconciliation meeting. They took all the powers out. Then they left the first part, and it's good in a sense, and it states clearly what we want to do. Just didn't have any powers to do it. So they bought some time, and I understood that. And then we moved on from there. More has happened. It's been an extraordinary time for the disclosure movement. But it's slowed down by the fact that we're having extraordinary political developments in the United States. I mean, I've been around a while. This is easily on a par, will soon be on a par with the period from 1965, 1975. I was in D.C. for a lot of that. I saw some huge marches. I saw some violence. It was intense. Hate, a lot of that. And then the civil rights movement was going on at the same time. And there were some major issues there. We're not there yet. But the FUFA, the engagement of the media and all the political rhetoric is probably exceeding that. Now, the question is whether it'll go to the street. So this is a big deal, and it slowed things down without question. But nevertheless, we're very close. And the insiders know it. And so the major pushback was on the bill. We were wondering what else they were going to come up with. Nothing serious, frankly, until now. And that was, of course, the article. So what happened here? I'm going to give you my interpretation. Historians will sort it out. Anna Paulina Luna said she was going to have a hearing. She wanted a skiff on May 27th. A hearing on, get that right? June 1. No, I'm sorry. April 27th, May 1. And then they were going to have a briefing on May 12th. All looking real good. But things were happening. A lot of stuff went down. And well, first of all, they had some people sick that couldn't do the skiff, which means they really didn't want to do the hearing. So they moved that into June. And then comes the hearing. They moved the hearing up. And then more things happened, right? I guess you could say the beginning of the tariff issue happened. In the meantime, they had set up a task force, which was also moving forward, very strong, very important. And they put Luna in charge of that. So she had her hands full with the task force, which has been getting documents about JFK. More is coming. They're really serious about it. I'm not saying this is going to flood because these are awkward documents, I can assure you. But the fact that they're doing it and getting it at all has really raised their credibility and given them a lot of gravitas. And more of those documents come out just makes them more powerful. They clearly have UAP on the schedule. That's really good. And so we're kind of hanging there, but something else was happening. I'm gonna toot my horn here, if you don't mind, a little horn tooting.
Sure. Please do.
Prior to that last announcement, going back a couple of all the way back to last year. So we had the hearing November, and just prior to November 13, I went into the Congress and delivered affidavits and witness statements for about 7 or 8 nuclear tampering witnesses. Okay. First-hand people, Air Force officers present when they were shut down. Robert Jacobs, who took the extraordinary film of a UFO coming in and just playing with one of our missiles at 8,000 miles an hour, and a number of others. And I hand-delivered a copy of these affidavits to 40 offices. The 17 offices of the Senate Intel, is about 20 or so of the subcommittee offices in the House. Then I mailed a copy into them, knowing that another set would come in about 4 or 5 days later. And then I had cards for all the offices. So then I sent an electronic copy of the affidavits into all of those offices.
I think I see where this is going. Okay.
Yeah. And then Mace holds the hearing.
Mm-hmm.
And one of those witnesses, Bob Salas, was there. And I helped get him in. After the hearing, Tyler Roberts has set up an interview with Mace. I got brought into it. And so we went up to her office, and I was in there for 30 minutes with her alone. And then 25 minutes or so, she interviewed Bob Salas and me, mostly Bob, filmed by Tyler. That's out there. She indicated she'd like to have the nuclear witnesses. Okay. So that was the 13th. Okay. Now, ever since then, I've been doing what I can to certainly get Bob Salas and those witnesses out there. What's the point I'm making? My view, the nuclear tampering witnesses are the most powerful witnesses out there, period, pretty much. Unless some USAP guys come in carrying equipment and God knows what else, or maybe even a body, wheels it in on a gurney. No, these are the most powerful. Mm-hmm. These are SAC-based officers who had the responsibility to turn the keys that would eventually annihilate a good part of civilization. So they weren't randomly picked off the street. Sure. Yeah. And they initially came forward, starting with Bob Salas, 94. Not long after that, Robert Hastings, extraordinary researcher, got in and wrote a masterpiece called UFOs and Nukes, interviewed hundreds of people, and just made the case flat out that our missiles were shut down. Not once, not twice, but a number of times. But we've got witnesses certainly for the 2 initial ones. And then research also indicated it happened in Russia. So this is a big deal. It is the most important thing we know about ETs. Not what they look like. Yeah. Not that they're creating hybrids, which I think they are. It's they turning off our nukes. All right. And so that is a big deal. So they have been trying to get in front of a hearing ever since. They have held.
There's a big difference between observing us and affecting our technology. Yes.
And they're not turning off Disneyland rides. They're turning off our nuclear weapons. They're cutting right to the heart of the most important thing in the world today on our end, which is the risk of nuclear war, which is closer than it's ever been, in case you're paying attention. Every day, something else comes out. Tulsi Gabbard just put out a film that was striking, powerful. Some people are already attacking it, talking about the closeness of nuclear war. And the Washington Post.
It is interesting, the timing of this, because in the article, they set the stage that the U.S. government has put out a disinformation campaign for
Okay.
decades. And then Salas's, Malmstrom Air Force Base experience was one of the cases that they highlighted and it seemed to try to debunk.
Oh yeah, I was rambling. That's where I'm going, and I know about that. Forgive me for rambling. I tend to ramble. I got to work on that. So the upshot is that, and plus Bob Salas and two other nuke witnesses were invited to the Contact in the Desert event. They were up on the website for months. People were seeing it, promoting it. So the upshot is that they clearly figured out that there was a good chance these gentlemen are going to testify at a hearing probably held by Luna. It could happen in July, could even happen late June, and they do not want that. They've ghosted these men for 30 years, essentially 60, and they couldn't kill them. They couldn't make them disappear, but they ghosted them, and generally they kind of kept them at bay. But apparently their time has come because they've just stuck to it and they've stayed alive. We're talking 84, 85. So this is not something they want. So, okay, what would they likely do? So they decided, got a lot of pressure. We're gonna make a bold move. They made a bold move on that cutting that bill. They made a bold move here. So the Wall Street Journal wanted to do an article. Sheckman, who I think is a legitimate journalist, was assigned that, and he has a woman that's a co-authoring with him. Her name escapes me right now. And so he went off to do the article.
It's Aruna Viswanatha.
Excellent, Alan. Avina Viswanatha, quality. And so, guess what? He interviews like 40 or 50 people, in scientists and in the Department of Defense. Didn't call me. I don't think he called Richard Dolan, but he interviewed all the inside people, and they gave him the information, and he wrote it up in the article. I got no problem with Sheckman, but they kind of blew it here, and here is why. When you're in a corner, you do desperate things. In the end of a chess game, people that are really in trouble, they tend to get desperate, make a bold move, and then the good player just creams them. So what they did with this article is two major debunking maneuvers. They felt that this might just buy them some time, push back. They were very, very pleased with this. So the first major one was, yes, we did disinformation, lots of disinformation. There were even pranks that were held, to fun people. And these are the men who were going out and doing things, maybe saying something, being interviewed, but it was not real. It was our disinformation campaign. They implied it covers it all without actually going there, which would have been even more ridiculous. And so, okay, it's disinformation. But here's the problem. One, they had never acknowledged that they were doing disinformation before. They never acknowledged that, when Haynes came out in 97 and said, no, it's crash test dummies, tall guys in Air Force uniforms that we dropped from planes in 52 that were mistaken for 4-foot gray aliens in 47. That's disinformation, but they didn't say that. They've been doing it for 60 years, and they had to acknowledge it. So right away, they're going to get attacked. Boom. All right. Why should we believe anything you say, including the rest of this article? And so they outed themselves on that. They threw themselves on their own sword to maybe buy a little time. Okay, not going to work.
It's the Richard Doty problem, right?
It's Richard Doty cubed. So, so that was the first half of the article. But then they had another problem. They needed to deal with the Bob Salas nuke witness situation that was getting closer and closer. He's actually in Mace's office talking to a member of Congress. I actually spoke, and Ron James spoke with Gilliland. There's photos of us talking after her briefing with Kozlowski. And she said, yeah, I'd like to talk to Bob Salas, but she hasn't, but that's all right. So what they decided to do was to go straight after the events, which is interesting given that Hastings interviewed 200 people. It's been out there for 30 some years. There's a major book, couple of documentaries, and 3 more books written by Bob Salas. We're going to take it on, right?
A lot of the legwork has already been done for you.
Yeah. They really thought really, really hard. How could we do it? And they came up with a master plan. No, this was us. Again, it was us. We were testing them with EMP devices to see if they could be taken down by an EMP from a nuclear weapon. Now, the physics is all wrong. It's absurd on its face, but it had a certain logic to it. And so Sheckman wrote it up. Since then, they have been ripped to pieces by a pride of lions on the internet. They're coming from every direction. Merrick Von Rennenkamp ripped it to pieces. Richard Dolan ripped it to pieces. You can't. It's all over the place. There's almost no support for this, but the logic of it is just being presented to people is like, this doesn't work. It's impossible. But it gets better, because one of the people that actually investigated the event, I don't know how long after, I don't think it was too long, could have been a couple of months, 3 months, but he was part of a group to try to investigate how the missiles got shut down. None other than my friend, Colonel John Alexander, who's been involved in damn near everything during his unbelievable career. And he stated clearly that, no, we ruled out the EMP, couldn't have been done. All kinds of reasons for that. I don't want to go into them, but read the stuff. It's impossible. It's ridiculous. It's absurd on its face.
Well, to give people an example really quick, and Greg in the comment section referred to Matt Ford's show where he explained how this EMP testing rig, how big it would be. And to build it, you have to bring in these large trucks. It takes, several days to build these platforms, cement slabs. All the meanwhile, none of the security people, Robert Salas, no one at the
security
compound,
people, not Bob, but the security people. Yeah,
the security people. No one noticed this. It somehow
you notice it, but it gets worse. It gets worse, Alan.
Yeah.
Let me make it worse for you.
Sure.
They said that we fake UFOs, right? We actually we have helicopters. We fake UFOs, so we do that too, right? As part of the disinformation. So what we did is we flew 2 helicopters in there, okay, and we made them look like a UFO.
Yeah. And
somehow, in addition to that, they then built a platform up that holds the giant EMP, about the right device, over the base. And then they made that glow so it looked like the UFO, but apparently they couldn't see the scaffolding. And that's what they saw. And then, of course, the missiles were turned off. They sent crews out right away. And somehow they disassembled the scaffolding and carried this massive EMP device off, right? And then the guys come in, the people that are going to restart the missiles, and they restart them right away. That's just for openers. The fact is that the way it's designed, it wouldn't work. And if it did work, it would knock out stuff all over the place. Instead of apparently just affect the what they call the inertial guidance device. And once you do that, they trick off. So they've made a complete fool of themselves. Have they reached the Colonel Haynes's level of 6-foot crash test dummies mistaken 5 years later for 4-foot grays? They're in the ballpark. I mean, they're getting there. All right.
And I would argue that that's actually seems more probable that extraterrestrial UFOs did this than their explanation. Just statistically, there's so many holes in their problem in their
one theory. Reason they're trying to get away with it, Alan, is that when these events took place, they scared the bejesus out of the security guys. These are not officers, right? A little younger families. They just basically scared the hell out of it. And then they reassigned them all over the place. They just sent them off in far corners. Many went to Vietnam right away. Okay, and that's the first. And I think after the first 2 events at Minot and Malmstrom, they speak up, well, we've got a problem here. And so they were kind of tipped off. Yeah. So any subsequent event, I think they swooped in and really hit these people with, the wrath of God and said, you're not going to say anything. Now, there is a witness or two for a later event. But most importantly, there are more security guys still alive that actually saw these things than there are SAC base officers, but they haven't come forward. However, as this thing continues to mature and get out there, at any time, 5 or 6 security guys can come forward and say, I don't think it was a giant thing with an EMP device. I saw it. I watched it for 20, 30, 40 minutes. And so they've only bought a little bit of time, but they also did a lot of damage to their situation. And so it's a big win for us. My job is to let people know that in case they're getting a little upset. It's a loss for the Wall Street Journal, not Sheckman. I don't think he did anything wrong. but the Wall Street Journal is a pretty substantial paper. And so the idea that they haven't been, well, and they've done articles on this issue. The Wall Street Journal's done a number of articles on this issue, and they're not really bad. And so they just let this go through. They sacrificed Joel on the altar of the truth embargo, and I actually feel bad for him.
Well, yes, but I do think that it was, a checkbook access journalism, possibly. Maybe Joel.
What do you mean by that?
Maybe Joel gets insider scoops from the Pentagon or whomsoever in exchange for putting out this article. Hey, give us some cover here, and we'll give you some access.
I don't think so. I would never want to put that out there because we just don't know. Mm-hmm. And that brings into real credibility the Wall Street Journal. And so, in a sense, we're going to put the Wall Street Journal up on the cross next to the Pentagon. Without further information, I will assume the Wall Street Journal wanted an article. There was a lot of stuff going on. They signed a quality reporter to go talk to the people. The one mistake he made, because we're not quite there yet, is that there's a number of very good researchers they could have talked to in our world that don't get big paychecks. I think he talked to Bob. I'm not sure.
He talked to Bob. Yep, Salas. And according to Bob, he said that he had a first conversation with him earlier on when the article was being written. They didn't mention that they were interested in the EMP theory at all to him. Didn't ask him any questions. Then he said he later talked to him a second time, less than a week, I guess, before the article was published. They had already sent people to come out and take a picture for the article. So the article was essentially already written. Yeah. And then Joel apparently had said to him, oh, and this is what the article is going to be about. Mm-hmm. And Salas said, well, I can counter that. I can rebuke that. And he didn't seem to be receptive to what Bob had to say. So, that's where, I hear that. No, that's anecdotal, but I don't think Bob has any reason to lie about that.
What? Oh, no, I'm sure. No, he doesn't lie.
Yeah. So, it does gives you the sense that there was a pre-planned agenda with the article.
Again,
do you really think do you think it's just surface level poor reporting that they didn't do their research?
They interviewed 40 inside people and scientists, right?
Mm-hmm.
I mean, they interviewed Kirkpatrick and all that. That's a lot of interviewing. You're going to quote the substantive sources.
That's true. Yeah.
And so he wrote what the government told him. I'm shocked that they did this. I'm shocked the government made this play, but I'm sort of understand the position they're in. It's not good right now. It's going to get worse, and I know that. And so they made a decision. But it gets better for us because what the Wall Street Journal did, Bob Salas saw this event back in '67. So it's been almost, it's like 58 years. Okay. He comes out in 1994. They did everything they could to get it into, really make it a story. Mm-hmm. Several of them attended and testified before 6 former members of Congress at my citizen hearing on disclosure in 13. They held a press conference in 19. I think they held a press conference in 2010. A lot of press came to the press club. The Washington Post wrote a funny article about it. They've done everything they humanly can, but they can't quite get there until the mighty oversight subcommittee of the House jumps in, and the 4 horsemen of the apocalypse, Mace, Luna, Burleson, and Burchett, just took it by the horns and have become world famous. All right. And so we don't know when the hearing is going to come, but by doing this, they put Bob Salas's name in a huge article in the Wall Street Journal. It's gone worldwide. They just took Bob from a struggling witness trying to get in there and made him a global figure. Bob could not be happier. He's got people coming at him from 8 different directions. We're kind of hoping we can get him on Joe Rogan. Fantastic, Joe for Joe. Solid as it could be. He's written a counter piece that went in the Ojai paper.
Yeah.
The Ojai sure lives. He sent the same article to the Wall Street Journal. They should print that. Absolutely should print that. If they don't, we're going to hammer him with that, right? We're going to embarrass him and shame him with that. And so
it's funny. It's funny how the timing of these things work, because my understanding, Bob was kind of trying to wind down a little bit at this point, and all of a sudden there's just boom, all this attention and excitement on the case.
Well, that's the other thing. I brought him in and two other witnesses, David Schindele and Robert Jameson, who is very up there in age, but he wasn't easy for him to come, and he came. We had a UFOs and Nukes panel, solid panel, had some fantastic people on it, Ross Coulthart, Danny Sheehan, and so forth. So, and by the way, the conference was fabulous. It was the best ever that I've been to, and next year is going to be even better. And so he's getting that. He's up on the site. He gives a lecture, and then shortly after that, he's in the Wall Street Journal, right? And so they have now made Bob Salas 10 times more a problem than went before the article, guaranteeing that Luna is going to bring him into the White House, and hopefully she'll bring in Schindele, possibly Robert Jacobs, and we may have one or two more. So they shot themselves in the foot. They bought a little time, but they underestimate all the time, because these people are insular. They're inside, they're the high level people. They're working the DOD. They got clearances. And so they don't go on social media. Social media is like this, no, can't do it. And so they don't get it. They don't understand how powerful it is now. They think it's TikTok videos and stuff. And it's not serious. No, it's not. It's filled with researchers that are capable of immediately descending on an issue and ripping it to pieces, publicly sharing their information, carving them up like a Christmas turkey. They still haven't figured that out.
I was watching an interview not too long ago with Katie Couric, and like, she gets it, right? And she's a classic reporter, anchor, and she gets it, and she is confused why other reporters, why politicians don't seem to understand that the dissemination and fact checking and information sharing, it's a whole new world. It's just not the traditional path. As it's done. You can't go back.
The internet is the greatest fact checking system of all time, and when you add AI, even better. It's also the greatest disinformation issue of all time. And
Very
how
true.
do you deal with that? There's only one way you deal with that situation. If I had a kid, right, is this: you have a child that's going to go to school. They absolutely, well, assuming our schools get reformed and actually can teach again, because they really can. Our education system's going in the toilet. Is that they have to learn how to go on the internet and figure out what's disinformation and what is fact, and how to disseminate the good from the bad and be able to navigate it. You wouldn't send a kid out into the forest and not give them any information about how to, walk through a forest and how to take care of yourself. But that's what they're doing with the net. And so that is key. If you can't tell between the good information and the bad information, and you're a child and you go on the net, by the time you're 17, you're already a QAnon down the rabbit hole person. You're screwed.
It's hard. I mean, it's frustrating, Steve, and I think that's part of the problem, because I have to fact check all the time, and there's things that I see that I'm like, I go and I look it up. Nope, false, right? And it takes time to actually do that, and I think a lot of people don't have the attention span or don't want to actually take the time to do the fact checking. But it's to my mind, it's worth it. So this article from the Wall Street Journal, do you know if there are any more parts in this series to come out?
They indicate that it was part of a series. I didn't notice that.
Yeah, at least the one of two parts. Was my impression. Yeah.
And probably by Sheckman again. Okay. Well, I'll tell you, we're going to get a litmus test if that's true. I love this because the Wall Street Journal is getting its head handed to it. Sheckman is getting a lot of grief, but again, I don't think he is the culprit here. And so, do they have the cojones to double down and come back with their counter EMP thing or whatever the hell they're going to come up with? Or are they going to realize they've been taken for a ride and come back the other way? All I can say is, Wall Street Journal, don't do it. Don't do it. Really, you're walking into a blind canyon. There's Indians all over the place up there. They're gonna destroy the whole wagon.
Save yourself. Yeah. And what I wanted to see more of was receipts, and I don't receive receipts. Bob Silas had mentioned that if the security officers at Malmstrom Air Force Base 1967 had seen or were privy to this apparent secret EMP test over their missile silo, that if that were true, they would have had to sign some kind of NDA of some sort.
Well, that's what they said. They signed an NDA so they wouldn't tell the Russians that they're testing missiles for EMP. That makes no sense. They did have to sign, I think, NDAs, and also have the bejesus scared out of them because it was a non-human craft shutting down our missiles. So that's kind of neither here nor there. But this is one of their big problems, is that I think one security person came forward. I don't know enough to go name, but I do know what happened. My understanding is that person was given hell. It did not go well at all. But there's dozens more. And as you know, more witnesses are coming forward all the time. In fact, I can't even keep up with the witnesses that are coming forward.
Steve, I'm sorry. So what you're saying is a security personnel had come forward to counter the claim against
Malmstrom? Came forward to say, I saw it, right? And he got worked over pretty bad. That's what I understand. I don't want to go into it.
Steve, you're saying saw what? The UFO or the apparent EMP rig?
No, he came forward. This has been a while ago to kind of confirm what Salas was saying. There was something over the base, but I happened to be up there, so I saw it, and he got ripped pretty bad. But that's the only one. But there are dozens more. And at some point, the bar's going to drop, and all of a sudden, they're going to start showing up. And then the Pentagon is going to have to deal with these guys who are probably pretty much retired now, not as old as Bob. They're near the end of their life. They don't have much to lose, but also the situation is not so scary. Their kids are grown. They're doing fine. And they're going to sit down, take an oath. Now, remember, these are security guys on the ICM basis. These aren't a bunch of guys hanging out at a canteen. And so they're going to have to somehow dismember or ridicule top people that they're running our ICBM bases, and nobody is going to believe it. So they're tinkering. They're just right here balancing on the edge. It's going to come down. It's going to crash. The sooner, the better. But I admire their chutzpah.
Right. So two things. So it reminds me of the Annie Jacobson book that she wrote, Area 51, claiming that the Roswell UFO was a disinformation faux UFO sent by the Russians with either deformed bodies of some sort on the craft, purposely crash landed on our base to trick us into thinking that these are aliens. Now, I find that ironic because now what we're saying is we tried the same thing on the USSR. We tried to convince them that what is seen over Area 51 in the 80s and 70s were UFOs, and not the SR-71 or the stealth bomber. Which is it? Like, so are both countries trying to convince each other of UFOs? Right?
The Soviet Union's got its own crash vehicles, right? The Soviet Union knows as much about this issue as we do, so that would have been ridiculous. Here's what happened, though. Now, let me be clear. Annie Jacobson is a great writer. She's done some fantastic work, and her book on nuclear war is fantastic. But she got taken for a ride. Disinformation. Somebody at Area 51, for whatever reason, got her attention and sat down and fed her this grotesque story. It's so awful. It's even worse than the thing that came up with the EMP device, and literally endangered her journalistic reputation and career. Now, she did print it. She could have done some vetting. There's a lot of people she had to talk to, but she printed it. So she was a victim of disinformation in that case because the government does do disinformation. But I'm particularly irritated by that. And I hope that Ms. Jacobson finally gets the confirmation of that and comes to understand it and comes back and pops them really good.
Well, as we mentioned earlier about Richard Doty, he did just that, right? He fed information to Paul Benowitz to lead Paul Benowitz into believing that extraterrestrial UFOs were flying over Albuquerque. And that was a cover story, apparently, for our own special crafts that we were.
It was more than that. It was more than that. You know what it was? He was really on them. And he was filming stuff and becoming a problem. And so it wasn't just a matter of disinformation. They basically went at him and tried to break him.
Because he was investigating.
He was investigating, so they give him this stuff, and it wasn't like they told him, "Oh, it's this," to cover and move on. Oh no, they were getting back to him and string him along until he killed himself. Greg Bishop covered that in a masterwork. So that's more than disinformation. That's murder. Okay. Now Rick Doty is trying to reestablish himself. He has that right, and he's been saying a lot of things, and it's some of it is helpful. Has he ever been held accountable? No. That was a national security action, completely legal. But that's a worst case example of disinformation.
Well, I like, just like you don't want to pass dispersions on Joel Skechtman on this article. I mean, do you think murder is really the right word for what happened to Paul?
You're right. It's not murder. It would be, what is the word? This is a criminal offense, but it's
assault.
Let me put it this way. There have been a number of trials that are a little more common, in which some kids or somebody super encourages a very distressed person to kill themselves, and they do kill themselves. They can be charged. And I don't know what the charge is, facilitating.
It's manslaughter of some sort, or
so
something.
Not murder. Thank you for correcting me. Not true. And ultimately not legal, because it was done under orders. And I'm glad that, he's acknowledged that. But I mean, put it this way. He's coming forward, obviously, at some degree he's acknowledged it. You'd like to put it behind him. Yeah. I get that. There's probably worse situations the government has done, without question. But you see the dance that we're doing here? This is not helping. And by the way,
this is what they want, right?
Yeah, that's what I want. Yeah. One of the reasons there's a battle in Los Angeles and political upheaval, the Capitol has been attacked. I can list 50,000 things. One of the reasons that we're in this dilemma right now, core reason, without getting into the minutiae, is that trusting government has collapsed to a point where the democracy is unstable. And one of the major contributors to that lack of trust is the complete inability of our government, or our military intelligence complex, to protect the country without lying through their teeth every single day. And as the media increased and people's access to information increased with the internet and email and social media, now podcasts, you've heard of those. There's like millions of them now. They still kept lying. And so nobody believes them. And so the truth embargo contributed mightily to the breakdown of trust in the United States, leading to multiple diseases infecting the body politic that could take down the democracy. And if it does, one of my last things before I, sail off to a remote island somewhere is the truth embargo has got to take a hell of a lot of responsibility for that and be ashamed.
Yeah. All right, so we have a question from Android in chat. He says, okay, here we go. I got too many. Going too fast, guys. Hold on. Okay. Steve, what would be your analysis if Wall Street Journal refuses to correct the story with the facts from Bob Salas?
No, the least they should do, and it's absolutely journalistic appropriate, is that when the principal that has been abused in that article sends in a competent, intelligent, which he's written, response, you don't publish it. That's absolutely obscene. That's all I'm interested in. For them to turn around would be, whoa, right? Whoever's the editor of the Wall Street Journal, if he does that, I'm going to buy him a lobster dinner, biggest restaurant in Manhattan. But what we want is for them to be clear. They have got to publish Bob's letter. And they can't say, well, we can't publish it because it was in the Ojai paper. And if they don't, trust me, I do a lot of podcasts. I'm going to barbecue them.
Okay, we got Android with another comment. It says it wants to add the fact that Matt Ford presented documents that the device from the Wall Street Journal was not released until after this event. Now that sounds like a mogul problem again, right?
Yeah, there's about 18 reasons why that explanation is ridiculous. Again, the whole idea that they built this thing and the guys didn't see it, and then they made it get it alight so it looked like a UFO, and then everybody's running around, the missiles go down, and then without the guys seeing it, they dismantled the damn thing and carted it off. Meanwhile, at the same time, you got people rushing out there to turn the missiles off. I mean, the average person. The truth embargo is based upon putting nonsense out to just regular citizens of this country who are living paycheck to paycheck. In a lot of cases, they've got kids, problems, and they see it and it's like, okay, and they just take it. And that's the vast majority of the people. And so if out of 330 million people, if about 295 million are kind of, okay, what the government said, even though there's a lot of people left over, even thousands of researchers, they're able to ride that game. But now as the internet is connecting just about everybody in the country, it's much more difficult to ride, a vehicle made up of that fundamentally core citizens who simply can't invest much time in it. That they were losing that, but it's all they have left, and so they're still trying to play that game. The same thing with Arrow, right? Arrow was set up just to be Arrow. And Kirkpatrick had an awful job. He wasn't supposed to do anything, and Grusch put him in a spot. He lost it, attacked Grusch, then quit. And then before he exited the door, they took another desperate attempt. In other words, this is not the first of pushbacks. And they persuaded him to put his name on a study that basically said, nothing here. We did it all. Don't have it. That study is another abomination that's floating around somewhere. It's like in desperation. It's like a person is about to be found out for serious crime in one of those comic movies, and they're trying. They can't deal with it, so they keep trying, and they make one more dumb thing after another and pile it up. That's what's going on.
Exactly. It's called a hasty generalization. Like whatever I can pull out of my hat right now. Yeah, exactly.
You're throwing. Somebody's coming at you, throwing pens at them. You're throwing your cupcakes at them. Whatever the hell, it's not going to work. It's just not going to work. So I'm not too upset by this.
Yeah. Well, and again, we have to talk about it. And because like you said, we have social media now. So now we can actually in real time counter the narrative. Whereas before you couldn't do that. You didn't have that opportunity. Unless somebody went to a bookstore and picked up a book and read, they didn't know. And now we can be loud about it, which is great.
We got a question. They just can't accept it.
Yeah. A question from Terrence. We got, do you think they're panicking with this obvious lie because they know the truth embargo is about to break? And thank you, Stevie Rock.
Bingo. Perfect. It is closing in on them. They're trying to buy some time. And there's another problem they have. Now, when I say they, I'm referring to the core insiders. All right. Mm-hmm. This is not the appointee level. This is down. That's who he's talking to. So they have another problem that's got them very scared. And it's not complicated. It's simple. And I do not make partisan statements. Anybody that's seen me do on our 13, 14, 1500 podcasts, interviews, they have a new administration, unlike anything they've ever seen before. Mm-hmm. And this administration, the president, has selected a very tight, supportive group of appointees across the board in all the key positions, particularly in defense and so forth, national security, so Homeland Security, whatever, National Intelligence Office, who are going to pretty much support whatever the president wants to do. And the president does whatever the hell he wants to do, right? And they know that. And so if the president wants to come out and say, yeah, we're not alone. We're not alone. Yeah, we've got those bodies. We've got those techs. There's nothing they can do. There's nobody to talk them out of it. And so they understand that right now they have a president that could walk out there tomorrow. And the reason the president could do that is because all the necessary platform that he can stand on to make the statement that will work and not get everybody upset or shock anybody has been built. The legislation, statements by numerous members of Congress that the ETs are real, scientists, all the stuff that's happened. All of this has built this platform, particularly the legislation. It built a platform in which the president come out and say, we're not alone. That's disclosure, capital D, followed by many other heads of state. And then the next day, when all hell breaks loose, they're ready. Got the arrow, they've got legislation. They'll have briefing rooms set up. They'll set up some panels, and it'll be orderly. Up until recently, they couldn't do that. It would have been absolute madness. And it would have, and if one of the other heads of state, particularly Xi Jinping or Putin, had done it, they'd have been caught flat-footed. So they're working really hard, which leads me to the point that I have to say over and over again. Nobody else is saying this. And I'd love to go on a major talk show, not going to name any names, and say this. If you want to get the cognitive dissonance out and kind of get more comfortable with all the crap that's going on, which doesn't make sense, here is what you need to know. The legislation, the briefing of Congress, the setting up of organizations like the Task Force and Arrow, all of this has nothing to do with finding out what's up there. They already know. They've known since 47. They've spent billions of dollars analyzing, tracking, doing science work on the crashed vehicles, re-engineering. They got stuff that'll take years to get out. They already know. Okay, well, fine. If they already know, why are we doing all this? Because they already know, but pretty soon they're going to have to tell us. And that's disclosure, capital D. And then all hell breaks loose. And so they need to get set up for that. They need to set it up so the president can do it and it's going to go well, but they can't tell us why. It's a classic catch-22, Joseph Heller, one of the great books of all time. In other words, they have to set up for disclosure, but they can't say why they're setting up. So they give you the next logical reason. It's time we found out about those UFOs. Arrow's going to study, going to make some whatever the hell. We're going to talk here, talk there. We're going to find out, going to get the reports in for the pilots. It's all not a ruse, but it is a diversion. Like when they set up a bunch of our drones into the giant orb swarms or plasma ball swarms, Foo Fighters basically, because they could not explain it. They couldn't deal with it. And so all they could do is send our drones up, let us see them and go, drone swarm. And grandfather everybody in. This is days of desperation. And so understand that all of this is just to set up so disclosure will go well. Now, they'd like to see disclosure wait off, another 5-10 years, but that's not going to happen. Yeah. And so now the stage is set. It could happen tomorrow. So they're really pretty uptight. I'm sure they're taking a lot of Xanax over there at the DOD.
Yeah, they might be taking something. I've got to ask you about this. That's brought up in the article, which you briefly touched on in the beginning. This here's the quote from the article. It turned out the witnesses, meaning those who had apparently seen UFOs or been exposed to information about
thousands of them, hundreds of thousands of them. Yeah.
It turned out the witnesses had been victims of a bizarre hazing ritual. Now, look, I understand there can be strange hazing rituals in the military and the intelligence community. For the people who are podcast listeners, Steve has covered his face with his hands. Steve, what's your take on this?
Look, there's a reason why the Air Force, of all the entities out there, has done nothing. I mean, they have been absolutely silent because the Air Force has the biggest problem post-disclosure. I mean, they are just going to have to be, apologizing for decades. I mean, they got the worst situation, worse than the Atomic Energy Commission, definitely worse than the Navy. Yeah. And so they're just staying back. Okay. But not surprisingly, they're happy to support, some efforts to hold off until everybody there is retired, moved on to Florida, playing golf and, whatever. And so this, hazing. Yeah, sure. We're talking some of the people that are hazing and making fun of our top pilots that pilot planes that can do unbelievable things. They're talking about people working the SAC bases and the ICM facilities. They're punking them. Of course, you're gonna punk these people. I mean, you want them as unstable as possible. I'm surprised they're not giving them LSD. This is embarrassing. This is 1997 plus. This is Haynes standing on that stage. Go watch the video. It's not hard to find. Trying to explain Roswell again, confirming the mogul balloon explanation, and then having to go to the crash test dummies because that was in play.
That didn't work out. And
it was
crash test dummies also didn't work out either.
Yeah. But they that's all they can do. And now they're trying it again. So that's the Air Force. And so all I can say is I'm going to be generous when we get the confirmation from the president. I'm not going to go running around, the Air Force Academy with a sign. I'm not going to scourge them in media, which I hope to have a lot of. I'm going to just make the simple point that the truth embargo has made victims of us all of us, including me. I mean, it's victimized me 8 ways to Sunday. It's victimized journalists. It's victimized the Air Force, the Navy. It's certainly victimized presidents. It's just a bad policy. It was good for maybe, 2 years, but it needed to end when you had the massive flyover over the Capitol back in 52, which apparently was a bunch of flying EMP devices.
well, that gets to another really important point too. Okay, so like you said, we would have to have some amazing technology that imitated UFOs, which would have been beyond the technology we're trying to cover up. Okay, let's just give them that if we wanted to.
That's a good point.
Two, this is a phenomenon that occurred worldwide. So did we provide these fake UFO videos to every country on the planet to create this facade? And back quickly, Steve, to the hazing ritual. I have to read this to you. Okay. So the definition of hazing is the imposition of strenuous, often humiliating tasks as part of a program of rigorous physical training and initiation. Now, if part of the hazing is to trick you and humiliate, right? You have to at least reveal it at some point.
Well, it's
not if you tell someone, "Hey, this is a secret, keep it a secret," and then they keep it for decades. That's not hazing.
Hazing is usually involved in somebody being part of a group, entering something, right? Sure. And they haze them to test their merit and let them know that, hey, you're coming into a group and of course fraternities are famous for this. So it's kind of attached to belonging to something. In this case, it's not attached to that at all. Basically, they just pulled a hoax on them, right? Or they set them up. So hazing is a kind way of saying what they did. They set up officers and highly skilled people to make asses of themselves. Okay. And so if they did that, those people that did that are going to need truth and reconciliation after disclosure.
Sure.
But
they're going to need some lawyers.
Come forward and say, look, if you tell all about this, you can be reconciled, but you got to tell everything. Otherwise, we're coming for you. So that's my take on hazing.
Yeah, Stone Habit in the comment actually said testing fake loyalty. I guess that could be a motivation, right?
Why don't they hand up some nuclear secrets and see how they do with that?
Right, exactly.
I hate to see this is not a good time for the United States government, particularly the military intelligence complex, to embarrass itself. The Washington Post just wrote a massive article 4 days ago, making it quite clear that we are this close to nuclear war. The Bulletin of Atomic Scientists has us this close to nuclear war. The Director of National, she's a DNI, Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, has put out a very intense, scary video. We're this close to nuclear war. And there are others. And you know why they're doing that? Because we're this close to nuclear war. And our moral authority and ability to get nations to cooperate to avoid, disaster. I mean, they're evacuating our embassy in Iraq because they're so afraid that Iran is going to attack U.S. facilities. So they're evacuating. So are 2 other Middle East countries, or the Gulf countries, because Iran could attack at any time. Israel could attack their nuclear facilities at any time. Right? You've got India. They've got nukes. Pretty much all of the 9 nuclear countries are in some sort of a shitstorm with somebody, and trusting governments collapsing. So, I one of the reasons I do what I do is because I became convinced a long time ago that a nuclear war was inevitable, and that there was no way we're going to politically work our way out, because we just aren't. I mean, we're doing exactly the opposite. But disclosure is so profound, so world changing, so paradigm shifting, so worldview altering, that in the post-paradigm era, we might be able to step back and rethink a little bit and start to address these issues and actually back away. There is nothing else that can do it. Some special book that you read and you go, oh, I got to get rid of the nukes, or just meditation, or I don't know what else somebody could have, but we're not even close. So we're literally dancing on the edge of the volcano, hoping we don't fall in, when there is a way to change things, but the government doesn't want that to come out because it doesn't want to be embarrassed. Apparently, it's more afraid of being embarrassed than completely turned to dust by a nuclear weapon. And meanwhile, everybody's building underground facilities everywhere. The United States is building them. Russia has built huge numbers. Switzerland has huge amounts of underground bunkers. Rich people are building underground bunkers. They're buying houses in New Zealand, putting underground bunkers under there. Right? I'm glad that the rich people are going to survive the nuclear war. What could we do with a world that didn't have rich people? But the message is clear. And that's why one of the reasons I do what I do. If it was just, we want to know about the ETs, it'll be so nice. No. I mean, I know there's ETs here. I don't even have to see them. But And this connection that I've just mentioned to you, what really solidifies it? They turn our nuclear weapons off repeatedly. They do it in Russia. They land craft next to schoolyards, not once, not twice, but a dozen or more times. Get out of the craft, invite them over, and put messages in their heads about this terrible disaster that's coming, implying that it's nuclear. These kids grow up with that. Some have handled it well, some of them haven't. We know about 2 major cases: Ruwa, Zimbabwe, Ariel School, and Westall in Australia. But there's been more. They tell contactees that too as well.
Yeah, I mean, if you think it is as bad as you think it is, our approach to, nuclear war, I would hope that the information, the messages from these contactees, is the benevolent one, and that they would be able to step in and prevent us from doing such a thing.
Well, are you ready?
I don't want to leave us on too heavy of a note. If you could leave us with just one thought, Steve, what would it be?
Oh God. Don't do that to me. Don't do that. One thought.
Anything you want.
Oh man, let me think about this. Okay, look. All I do is follow this issue and try to give the big picture. I'm not a researcher. Mm-hmm. There are other people doing that. I don't get into fights. I don't get into minutia. I don't get down. The evidence is already there. I don't care. I don't need to say anymore. Mm-hmm. I'm trying to pursue the political process as best I can. Danny Sheehan and the New Paradigm Institute are doing it too, and they're bigger than I am. That's okay, right? And we're getting there. Try to stay calm. Don't get overwrought. Try not to get too depressed over the domestic and foreign developments, though it's hard not to. Mm-hmm. Understand that a major change could be coming, that there are people trying to make this happen, all right? And once again, try not to overreact to the process going on, because it's not about finding what these things are. They already know. It is trying to set up a platform and get everything ready so they can make the announcement. And you may say, that's not true. Yeah, it is. They're going to make an announcement sometime, and they want to be ready for it. Now, mm-hmm. It could happen later or sooner, depending upon what's happening in the world. But it's coming. And I have been talking about the nearness of disclosure over various ways. I never pick a date for years. And I've been trolled about that. I don't blame them. But I swear to you, no matter what I've said in the past, I am more optimistic than I've ever been in 29 years.
Perfect. Well, let's leave it at that. If you appreciate Steve Bassett as much as so many of us do in this world, please check out paradigmresearchgroup.org. Mm-hmm. Also Hollywood
Disclosure Alliance.
.org. And did you set that up with Dan Harari?
Yes. Dan and I founded that about 1.5 years ago, and it's up to 205 members and growing fast. And if you are someone in Hollywood that is open to this issue and you don't mind putting your name and your photo behind it, we'll get you a membership. And if you are somebody in the ET issue that wants to try to help with create content, get involved in the creation of content in some way, not just research, you could become a UAP founding member. The other would be a Hollywood founding member. We're networking. Things are happening. We don't make money. We're purely nonprofit. And we're helping to make content, create content, not so much for the disclosure process, because that's moving along quite nicely, but for the post-disclosure world, when 8.3 billion people want to know everything all at once, everywhere.
Let's do it. All right, Steve, thanks so much. Have a good night. And thank you, everybody, for your chat, questions, your comments. I really appreciate it. As a friendly reminder, Coffee and UFOs is rebroadcast on the UnX Network Thursday evenings, 11 p.m. Pacific Time, 2 a.m. Eastern Time, Friday mornings. Special thanks to Race Hobbs and Margie K at the UnX Network. And if you guys are a fan of this podcast, please like, comment down below. I'd love to hear your thoughts on tonight's subject. Subscribe. And for the podcast listeners, give a good rate and review. I'd really appreciate it. We continue to grow, and that's because of you and the great guests we have every week. So peace and love, everyone, and live in the mystery.